Hi guys, welcome to Little Wicket Railway. I'm Rob and prepared to be shocked because it's a layout build video. Yes, this is a series covering what could be the world's slowest layout build. Currently, I'm averaging a video every 11 months, and at that rate, I'll be collecting my pension before I've even finished the baseboards. However, there has been one very important change since the last video. I currently don't have a day job, so I find myself with some time on my hands. And that means it's time to get serious about this railway. So in this video, there are more major track design changes. I build my first L-Girders, and we look at the benefits of open frame benchwork. But before we start, could I ask you to do me a massive favour? YouTube tells me that nearly 3/4 of you who watch this video won't be subscribed to the channel. Subscribing doesn't cost you a thing, but it makes a big difference to me and the channel because it lets YouTube know that you're enjoying the videos, and in turn, YouTube might suggest my videos to more people. And if you really want to help me out, then please hit the like button and maybe leave me a motivational comment to give me a kick up the butt and encourage me to make some progress on this railway. Right, on to the design changes. The design has changed many times over the last 2 years, but this is the one you might remember from the previous build videos. It's basically a continuous loop and it would have required me to duck under to get into it. I could have potentially put in a lift out section here, but it would have involved cutting 4 tracks, which were all on gradients, and I don't think I have the skills to be able to do something like that. A few months ago, I was invited to film making tracks at the Great Electric Train Show, and I was able to get inside the operating area. This involved ducking under the benchwork with my camera equipment, and I hated it. I really didn't like having to get down and crawl under. Every time I needed something from a bag or to change a battery, it involved getting down on my hands and knees. I'm nearly 40, it already hurts to do things like that, and I was always worried about knocking the frame or catching the wiring with a tripod or something like that. I realised I needed to change my design. Plus, I want my friends and family to come round to view the layout. I don't want them having to crawl around on their hands and knees either. So very reluctantly, I modified the design to have a walkway into the centre of the layout. Having a gap meant that trains could no longer run continuously around the outside, so essentially it's now a folded dog bone design instead. Some of the sweeping curves and long runs had to be sacrificed. The gap also meant that trains could no longer head up to the branch line from here. They now have to come up along this wall behind the mainline station and approach from this side, which meant flipping the branch station around, but that does actually feel a bit nicer because it's slightly further away from the mainline station. I've decided to get rid of the industry that was going to be on top of the helix, and that is now going to be completely scenic. 2 reasons for that decision. Firstly, I thought it might be too cluttered with track, and I want to keep it entirely scenic. And secondly, it probably wasn't wise to put track or point work over a helix, which is going to be hard to access. Instead, a small industry will be located up near the Branchline station, and this is similar to how Harborne station was in real life, which had Chad Valley Toys connected to it, or Rotten Park Road, which had the brewery spur. Also, having it up here on the branch gives more reasons for the branch line to actually exist because it's being used for passenger and goods services. Wagon shunting can still take place, and trains can still run between here and the big city goods terminus, which is a nice long run around the whole layout. With the factory on the helix gone, there was no need for the goods siding, and to create a bit more space, I removed the 4-track section and shifted the junction point work closer to the mainline station, where it could be controlled by the signal box there. The city terminus hasn't really changed that much, and overall the new design uses about 10% less track, which will save me a bit of money. So that's the new design, and I very much doubt it'll be the final version, but it's just time to start building now and see what happens. I did the benchwork for the staging area in the previous videos, and I'll stick a link to one of those up here. All that benchwork's still in place, it hasn't collapsed yet, so I'm taking that as a good sign. In this video, I want to get the framework up for the branch line section, and I want to try a completely different method to the one I used for the staging area. For the staging, I made a box grid frame out of 18mm ply and then put a 9mm plywood top over the whole thing with a 5mm foam road bed on top of that. And that was perfect for the staging area because it needed to be completely flat and it was going to accommodate a lot of track. I knew exactly where that track was going to go in advance, so could plan where the framing needed to be in order to avoid wiring and points. And once it was all installed, it was very unlikely that I'd need to move that track again. I also wanted it to be quite shallow so that I could use the space under it for storage. Whereas this branch line area doesn't have loads of track, but the track that it does have will be at different heights and on gradients. Plus the track work for areas such as the industry, which will be down there, isn't set in stone yet. So I want to add in some flexibility in case I want to change things later on, which is why I need a completely different approach. I'm going to use open frame benchwork, and it's going to be supported on things called L-Girders. L-Girders are formed by combining two lengths of wood in an L shape, and this gives it a lot of strength, meaning it can be used to create benchwork spanning long distances without needing lots of support. Once you've got two L-Girders, cross bracing is added between the two, and this is where the versatility of the system comes in, because those cross braces can be moved very easily throughout the build and spaced however you need them to be spaced in order to accommodate point motors and wiring and things like that. Then for inclines, you just attach risers to the bracing, and on top of those risers is where you put your track bed. That's why it's called open frame, because unlike the staging area, which was completely covered in a sheet of plywood, most of this benchwork will remain open, with only the areas that have track bed being covered. Right, that's the theory. Time to put it into practice and build an L-Girder that will run the entire length of this wall. To make the L-Girder, I'm using two pieces of plain square edge timber. One piece is 25 by 50 millimeters, and that's the piece that will go horizontally on top. And the other piece is 25 by 75 millimeters, and that's the piece that will be vertical and attached to the wall. I'm gluing them with PVA, clamping them, and then putting screws in every 30 centimeters. I always drill pilot holes and countersink before putting the screw in to avoid the risk of the wood splitting. My PVA hasn't been used for so long that it had the consistency of cottage cheese and wouldn't come out the nozzle, so I had to take the top off and squeeze it out in blobs, then smooth it out with my finger, hence the gloves, but it still seemed to work okay. Originally, I planned to cut all the wood I need for this benchwork from a large sheet of 18mm plywood, and it would have been cheaper than using PSE, but from my experience of doing this to make the staging, it's very messy and time consuming, so to make life easier, this timber came pre-cut from the supplier. So that's my first L-Girder done and ready to go on the wall at the right height. But that's not as simple as it sounds. The height of every part of this layout can be measured from a reference point of 0, which is marked on the wall by the laser. So for example, the staging area is 40 centimeters below this line, and the track for the Branchline station will be 16 centimeters above that line. If I want the track on this section of benchwork to be at 0, I need to mount this taking into account the fact that it's going to have a 50mm spacer, a 9mm sub road bed, and then a 3mm cork or rubber road bed as well. So I actually need to mount this 62mm below this 0 reference line. The track in this area doesn't actually go to 0, it goes slightly above 0, so I could mount it slightly higher, but I'd rather play it safe because it's easier to rise track up than it is to take track down into the framework once it's installed. Right, let's get this on the wall. So that's my first L-Girder on the wall, and it didn't actually take that long, and I've managed to get it all at the right height and it's relatively level, so I'm happy with that and ready to move on to the second L-Girder. And here is the second L-Girder in place. Didn't take me as long to make this one because I knew what I was doing. This one has 3 legs to give it support because it obviously can't attach to a wall. Each leg has an adjustable foot on it. At the far end, there's a short section of L-Girder between the 2 girders, just to give a bit of extra support. I'm not sure where I'm going to put the bracing yet. And at this end, there is a temporary brace in place just to make sure the L-Girders are kept the correct width apart. And now it's time to add the bracing. And as you can see, I've now got my cross bracing cut and I've spaced them out approximately where they're going to be. Each one is cut to roughly the right length to match the shape of the layout as it curves inwards after this return loop part. None of these are secured at the moment, but when it comes to securing them, it's just a case of a screw from the underside of each L-Girder into the bottom of these. And the versatility side of things is that if you decide you want to put a point motor here later on, you simply unscrew it, shift it along, screw it back in, and you can easily fit your point motor. They don't have to be parallel, they can be at an angle. They should really be evenly spaced, but they don't have to be perfectly evenly spaced. So loads of flexibility with this style of design. I'm not going to fit these in for the moment because I'm going to lay out my track and see how it looks. And this is where things start to get exciting because you can start to imagine how it's all going to come together. And this is probably a good place to leave it for this week. So if you enjoyed it, then please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Special thanks to all the YouTube members and patrons for your support. It's very much appreciated, and I will put your names up on screen here. That's about it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see you again soon.